I am Mary and I stayed silent for 20 years, and today I am going to tell you everything, but before we start, make sure you hit the subscribe button because we are close to reaching our goal and you'll not want to miss the other stories that are coming. You click this video because you saw the title and you want to know why someone would stop talking for 2 whole decades, and I promise you the truth is stranger than anything you are imagining right now. I was just a kid when it happened. One single night turned my life upside down. One single moment took away my voice, and it was not an accident. It was not because of an illness, and it was not because I chose it. I lost my voice because of something I heard, something I should have never heard, something so dangerous that it could have destroyed my family forever. And the strangest thing is that the night it happened did not even start in a scary way. It started like any other night, but deep down something was already wrong, and I did not see it yet. Imagine going to bed one night with your life completely normal and waking up the next day unable to speak, no sound coming out of your mouth, no scream, no whisper, nothing. And when people ask you what happened, you cannot explain it because the truth is so tangled in fear and secrets that even if you tried, no one would believe you. And you might be thinking, Mary, what could be so terrible that you would rather stay silent for 20 years than tell anyone about it? And I will tell you soon. But before that, I need you to stay with me until the end because there is a moment in the middle of this story that will change completely the way you see everything I am about to say. Nothing in my life made sense after that night. And as you hear this, you might even start questioning your own family, your own friends, and who you can really trust, because what happened to me could happen to anyone, and it might already be happening around you without you knowing. This is not just a story about silence. It is about fear, about hidden truths, about how a single decision can erase the person you thought you were. And as I take you back to the night it all began, I want you to remember that every small detail matters, because later you will see how each piece connects to something much bigger and much darker. So let us go back in time to when I was still just a normal girl, when my voice was still mine, and when I thought the people I loved would never hurt me. Back then, before everything changed, my days were filled with simple things and simple joys. I would wake up in a small room painted in light colors, the window facing the street where the morning light always spilled in like warm water. My mom would call me for breakfast, and my dad would already be reading the newspaper at the table. My family seemed ordinary from the outside, the kind of family you would pass by in the neighborhood and think they have no problems. We had dinners together. We went to the park on weekends, and sometimes my parents even let me invite my best friend Sophie for sleepovers. She lived just 2 houses down, and we would talk for hours about school, crushes, silly games, and dreams about what we wanted to be. When we grew up, everything felt safe, predictable, and unshakable. But sometimes late at night, when I was supposed to be asleep, I would hear faint whispers from the living room, not like normal conversations, more like arguments, where the voices were low and tense, as if they were afraid the neighbors might hear. Sometimes I would catch certain words like debt, like danger, like keep quiet, but I was young, and those words floated in my mind without meaning. I told myself that all families argued sometimes, and maybe I was overthinking it. My dad was a quiet man, rarely showing strong emotions. He worked long hours, and when he came home, he either read or watched TV. My mom was warmer, always asking me about my day, hugging me when I looked sad, but there was something in her eyes, something I could not name, yet like she was carrying a heavy secret she could never put down. At school, I was an average student. I liked art class the most because it was the one place where I could express whatever I felt without having to explain it in words. I drew houses with windows too big and skies too dark, and my teacher once asked if I was okay. I smiled and said I was fine, but even I did not understand why my drawings looked that way. My best friend Sophie sometimes mentioned she thought my parents were strange, not in a bad way, just different. She said her parents talked freely around her, but mine seemed to choose their words carefully. When I was around, I laughed it off, but deep down I knew she was right. Then there was our neighbor, Mr. Harris, an older man who lived alone and always seemed to be watching everything from his porch. Sometimes I caught him looking at our house for long stretches of time, and when I waved, he would either wave back too quickly or look away, almost guilty. One summer afternoon, I remember overhearing my parents talking about him. My mom's voice was sharp. She said we should stay away from him. My dad said something about owing him, and that was when I heard the word again, debt. It meant nothing to me back then, but it will matter later in ways you cannot imagine. These moments were like little cracks in the walls of my safe world, tiny at first, easy to ignore, but slowly growing, and soon they would split everything apart. But at that time I thought I was just a regular girl in a regular family, and I had no idea that I was living inside a story that was already being written without my knowledge. And before I take you to the night that changed everything forever, I need you to understand this picture of my life, because the contrast between what it was and what it became is what will make the truth hit even harder. So imagine this warm little world, my small bedroom, my parents at the breakfast table, Sophie waiting outside for me to walk to school. Imagine it all frozen in time, because the moment I step into the memory of that night, everything will start to crack and the silence will begin. It was a Saturday evening, the kind of evening when everything feels too normal to expect anything unusual to happen. The air outside was still warm from the day, and the smell of dinner was coming from the kitchen. My mom was cooking her favorite roast, and my dad was setting the table, which was strange, because he almost never helped with that. Sophie had gone home earlier after we spent the afternoon drawing in my room, and I remember feeling a little bored as I sat on the couch flipping through a magazine. The house was calm, but there was this odd weight in the air, like the silence before a storm. I noticed my parents kept exchanging glances, quick little looks they thought I would not see. My mom's smile was forced, and my dad's eyes were restless, moving like he was listening for something. At around 7, the doorbell rang. It was Mr. Harris, our neighbor, and I remember the way my mom froze for half a second before going to open the door. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited, carrying a small envelope in his hand. He smiled at me, but it was not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that feels like it has a hidden meaning. They went into the dining room and told me to stay in the living room. So I sat there pretending to read while my ears reached for every sound. At first it was quiet, just the clinking of plates. Then the voices started low. My dad said something about not having enough time. My mom said this was the last time. And Mr. Harris said, if anyone found out, it would ruin everything. I leaned a little closer, trying not to make a sound, my heart beating faster than I heard it. The sentence that froze me in place. She does not know the truth, and she never will. My mom's voice was sharp, almost angry. My dad said we cannot risk her saying anything. And that is when Mr. Harris lowered his voice and said, then make sure she never says a word again. I felt my chest tighten. I did not understand exactly what they meant, but the way he said it made my skin crawl. A plate clinked against the table, and then there was a pause, like they realized they had said too much. My mom told Mr. Harris to leave, and when he did, he glanced at me for just a moment, his eyes cold and flat. I could not move for a while. After that, I went to my room trying to make sense of what I had heard, but the words kept echoing, never say a word again. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, my mom came into my room. She sat on the edge of my bed, and for a moment, she looked like she was about to cry. She touched my hair and said in a low voice, some things you hear are not for you to repeat, Mary. Sometimes silence is the safest choice. I nodded, but I wanted to ask her what she meant. I wanted to ask who Mr. Harris really was and why they were talking about me like that. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out, no sound, not even a whisper. It was like my voice had been locked away, and an instant panic rose inside me. I tried again, but it was useless. I looked at my mom, terrified, and she just smiled softly as if nothing was wrong, kissed my forehead, and told me to sleep. Well, the next morning my voice was still gone, and no one acted surprised. My dad just said we would go to the doctor later, but the look he gave my mom told me they already knew this would happen, and that was the moment I realized my life would never be the same. My safe little world from before had shattered into pieces, and I did not even understand why yet. The morning after that night felt like I had woken up in a world that was almost the same, but somehow completely different. I could hear the sounds of the street outside, birds singing, car doors closing, people talking, but inside me, everything was quiet, too quiet. My mom called me for breakfast, and I walked to the kitchen hoping maybe my voice would come back if I just tried again. I sat down, and my dad asked if I wanted juice. I opened my mouth and tried to answer, but nothing came out, just air moving and my throat tightening. I saw his eyes flicker to my mom, who just put food on my plate and told me to eat as if this was normal. I tried to signal that something was wrong, but she put her hand on mine and said it would be okay, we would see the doctor later, and that I should not worry. But how could I not worry when my own voice had disappeared overnight? And no one seemed shocked when we went to the clinic that afternoon. The doctor examined me. He checked my throat, my ears, even my breathing. He asked if I had been scared or hurt recently. My parents stayed close behind me the entire time. When I tried to nod or shake my head, my mom answered for me. She said I had been fine, that nothing unusual had happened. The doctor finally said it might be psychological, maybe a temporary reaction to stress, and suggested speech therapy. But as we left, I noticed my parents did not make any appointment. They just thanked him and walked out. In silence at home, things changed quickly. I was not allowed to go to Sophie's house anymore. My parents said it was better if I stayed inside for a while. They said I needed to rest, but I could see the way my mom watched me now, like she was guarding me from something, or maybe guarding something from me. Sophie came by a couple of times, knocking on my window, asking why I had not been at school. I tried to write her notes, but before I could pass them, my mom would call me away and tell Sophie to leave. I started to feel like the walls of our house were closing in. Every sound felt sharper, the creak of the floor, the ticking of the clock, and sometimes at night I would hear footsteps outside my bedroom door, slow and careful, like someone was checking if I was asleep. My dad stopped reading the newspaper at the table and instead would sit in the living room staring at nothing, his face tense. One evening I caught him talking to Mr. Harris again by the front gate, their voices low. Mr. Harris handed him another envelope, and when they noticed me watching, they both went silent, and walked away. After that, my dreams started to change. I would dream of shadows in the hallway, of a hand covering my mouth, of voices telling me to stay quiet forever. And every time I woke up, my throat would feel tighter, like my body remembered, even if my mind did not fully understand. As days turned into weeks, the silence between me and my parents grew heavier. They stopped asking me questions, stopped trying to get me to write things down. It was almost like they preferred me this way, voiceless and unable to tell anyone what I might know. And that was when I began to suspect that my missing voice was not an accident at all, but something they wanted to keep this way. The weeks that followed felt like living inside a shadow. Every day looked almost the same from the outside, but inside the house the air felt heavier, like something invisible was pressing against me. My parents started locking the front door, even when we were all inside, and the keys were never left on the hook anymore. If I wanted to go outside, even to the backyard, my mom would follow me and pretend she was just keeping me company. But I could feel her eyes on me the whole time. At school, things got worse. My parents told the teacher about my silence, but they also told her I should not be left alone with other students during breaks. I noticed that Sophie had started avoiding me, not because she wanted to, but because every time she tried to talk to me, the teacher or the assistant would interrupt, like they were making sure we could not be alone to exchange notes. One afternoon, I stayed behind in class to collect my things and saw a folded paper sticking out of my desk. It was from Sophie. It said, "I think something bad happened to you. Meet me after school by the old playground." I hid the note in my pocket, but as soon as I stepped outside, my dad's car was already there waiting, and he said we were going home early that night. I tried to sneak out to the playground, but when I opened my window, I saw a figure standing by the fence in the dark. It was not Sophie, it was Mr. Harris, and he was staring right at my window. Without moving, I froze and slowly closed the curtain, my heart pounding. The next morning, I found a small piece of paper under my pillow and handwriting I did not recognize. It said, "Silence is safety. Remember." That I did not know how it got there. I had locked my door before sleeping. After that night, I began to notice small things moving in my room. Objects I had left in one place would be somewhere else in the morning. Once I woke up to find my notebook open on my desk, even though I was sure I had put it in the drawer under my bed. My parents acted like nothing strange was happening, but I could feel something building, like they were waiting for something to happen, or maybe someone was pressuring them again. I remembered the envelopes from Mr. Harris, the low voices, the way my mom's hand had trembled that first night. The tension between them grew too. I could hear them arguing behind closed doors, words like "risk" and "not ready" and "she will find out" slipping through the walls, and each time my mom would come out, her face pale and her smile forced. I knew then that whatever they were hiding, it was not over. In fact, it was only getting closer. It happened on a rainy Thursday, the kind of rain that made the sky look like it would never clear again. The streets were empty, and the sound of water against the roof filled every corner of the house. My mom had gone to the store, or at least that is what she said, but I noticed she left without taking her purse. My dad was in the garage, which was unusual, because he never worked on anything there. When it rained, I was in my room staring out the window when I saw movement by the gate. At first, I thought it was Mr. Harris again, but when I looked closer, I realized it was Sophie. She was soaked, holding her backpack tight against her chest. She looked around before rushing to my window. I opened it as quietly as I could, and she climbed halfway up the fence to get closer. She pulled something from her bag and held it up. It was a small old photograph, the edges torn. She mouthed the words, "This is you." I frowned, not understanding. She pointed to a little girl in the photo standing in front of a house I had never seen, next to a woman who was not my mom. Before I could write a question, my dad's voice came from behind me saying, "What are you doing?" I spun around, and he was standing in the doorway, his face pale. Sophie dropped back down to the ground and ran. My dad came into the room and closed the window, then locked it. He told me never to open it again, and his voice was shaking. Later that night, when my mom came home, they argued in the kitchen louder than usual. I could hear every word she said. "She is starting to remember," he said. "She is not supposed to remember. She said it is not safe if she finds out the truth." My dad told her it was already too late. I sat there frozen, my mind spinning. What was I supposed to remember? Who was the woman in the photograph? And why was Sophie giving it to me? The next day, I checked my backpack and found the photograph inside, wrapped in a page from an old newspaper. The headline was from almost 20 years ago, about a fire that destroyed a house on the edge of town. It said a woman and her daughter were missing, presumed dead. The daughter's name was Mary, my name, and the woman's name was not my mom's name. My hands shook as I read it. My parents had never mentioned anything about a fire, about another house, about another woman, and suddenly the silence they wanted from me made sense. They were hiding my past from me. They were hiding who I really was, and maybe they had taken my voice to make sure I never asked the wrong questions. It happened on a rainy Thursday, the kind of rain that made the sky look like it would never clear again. The streets were empty, and the sound of water against the roof filled every corner of the house. My mom had gone to the store, or at least that is what she said, but I noticed she left without taking her purse. My dad was in the garage, which was unusual, because he never worked on anything there. When it rained, I was in my room staring out the window when I saw movement by the gate. At first, I thought it was Mr. Harris again, but when I looked closer, I realized it was Sophie. She was soaked, holding her backpack tight against her chest. She looked around before rushing to my window. I opened it as quietly as I could, and she climbed halfway up the fence to get closer. She pulled something from her bag and held it up. It was a small, old photograph, the edges torn. She mouthed the words, "This is you." I frowned, not understanding. She pointed to a little girl in the photo, standing in front of a house. I had never seen next to a woman who was not my mom before. I could write a question. My dad's voice came from behind me, saying, "What are you doing?" I spun around, and he was standing in the doorway, his face pale. Sophie dropped back down to the ground and ran. My dad came into the room and closed the window, then locked it. He told me never to open it again, and his voice was shaking. Later that night, when my mom came home, they argued in the kitchen louder than usual. I could hear every word she said. She is starting to remember. He said she is not supposed to remember. She said it is not safe if she finds out the truth. My dad told her it was already too late. I sat there frozen, my mind spinning. What was I supposed to remember? Who was the woman in the photograph? And why was Sophie giving it to me? The next day, I checked my backpack and found the photograph inside, wrapped in a page from an old newspaper. The headline was from almost 20 years ago, about a fire that destroyed a house on the edge of town. It said a woman and her daughter were missing, presumed dead. The daughter's name was Mary, my name, and the woman's name was not my mom's name. My hands shook as I read it. My parents had never mentioned anything about a fire, about another house, about another woman, and suddenly the silence they wanted from me made sense. They were hiding my past from me. They were hiding who I really was, and maybe they had taken my voice to make sure I never asked the wrong questions. The discovery of that photograph and the newspaper page changed everything for me. I felt like the ground beneath my feet had disappeared, and I was falling into a darkness I did not understand. I kept thinking about the woman in the photo, who was not my mom, and about the house that burned down, and how my parents had never told me a word about any of it. I realized then that the silence they forced upon me was more than just about hiding a secret. It was about protecting me, or maybe protecting themselves from a truth too dangerous to face. I started watching my parents more closely, trying to catch any slip or look that would explain what had really happened. The arguments behind closed doors, the secret meetings with Mr. Harris, the sudden disappearances of important documents. I felt trapped between the world I knew and the shadow of the past creeping into my life every day. And then one night, something happened that I will never forget. I woke up to the sound of voices whispering just outside my bedroom door. I could hear my mom and dad talking in low, hurried tones. Their words rushed, but I caught fragments like "not safe enough, must stop her, and it will ruin everything." I lay there frozen, trying to understand what they were really saying. The next morning, I confronted my mom with a photograph, but she just looked away and said, "Some things are better left forgotten." Her voice was trembling, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. I knew then that whatever had happened so many years ago was still alive and dangerous, and that I was right in the middle of it. But the biggest shock was yet to come, because the silence I had kept for 20 years was not just about a lost voice. It was about the terrifying truth of who I really was and the people who wanted to keep it hidden forever. The day came when I could no longer hold back the questions and the fear that had been building inside me for so long. I knew I needed answers, even if those answers would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. I found the courage to confront my parents in the quietest moment of the evening, the air heavy with unspoken words. I asked them about the fire, about the woman in the photograph, about why I had never been told the truth at first. They hesitated, their eyes avoiding mine, my mother's hands trembling as she struggled to find words. Finally, my father sighed deeply and said, "The truth is painful, but you deserve to know you are not who you think you are. The woman in the photo is your birth mother, and the house that burned down was her home. We tried to protect you from the darkness that came with it. Your real father was involved in things no one should ever know, and when the fire happened, we had to make a choice: keep you safe or let you be taken away by people who wanted to silence you forever. We chose to keep you with us, and in doing so, we took your voice because silence was your shield." I felt the room spin, my world breaking apart, and yet a strange relief washed over me, because for the first time I understood why I was silent and why the silence had kept me alive. But the story did not end there. There was more to uncover, more pain, more secrets, and the biggest betrayal was yet to be revealed. As I looked at my parents' eyes searching for trust, one realized that sometimes the people we love the most can be the ones who hurt us the deepest, and that silence can be both a prison and a protection, a curse and a salvation. The moment I spoke again after 20 years was not gentle. It was a scream filled with all the anger, fear, and sorrow I had kept locked inside. It was the start of my fight to reclaim my life and my voice, and to uncover the truth, no matter how dark it was. The scream that finally escaped me after 20 years felt like breaking chains that had bound my soul for too long. It was loud, raw, and filled with the pain of all those silent years. My parents looked at me with shock mixed with fear, as if they had forgotten that I was still there, and that I still had a voice to raise. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. I could feel years of anger and confusion pouring out of me, but beneath it all there was a deep desire to understand, to heal, and to reclaim what had been taken from me. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. My parents tried to explain more pieces of the puzzle, but some truths remained hidden, locked away behind walls built by fear and guilt. I began to gather my courage and reach out to people who might know more about my past, about the fire, and about the man my parents called my real father. Little by little, I uncovered stories of betrayal, lies, and a dangerous world I had never imagined existed. But through it all, I found strength in my silence, turning it into a voice stronger than ever before. And even though the scars would remain, I knew that I was finally free to speak my truth and to live my life on my own terms. And now, as I share this story with you, I want you to remember that silence can hide many things, but your voice is your power. Never let fear take it away from you, because the truth, no matter how dark, is the light that will set you free. The months after I found my voice again were filled with both relief and new challenges. My family slowly started to heal, but the scars of the past remained like shadows that would not disappear. One day, I received a letter without a name or a return address. Inside it said, "I know why you were silent." And that was when I realized the story was not over. The letter spoke of secrets deeper than I imagined, of people watching and waiting for me to stay quiet. It said the silence was safety, but only if I chose to listen. The handwriting was familiar, yet I could not place it. Someone close to me was still holding pieces of the truth, and maybe watching from the shadows. The final revelation came when I confronted the person I least expected. Their confession shattered what little trust one had left, but also explained everything. The silence had been a shield, but also a prison, a way to protect me from dangers I was only now beginning to understand. And as I close this chapter of my story, I want you to know that sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we have to face to be free, and that speaking your truth, even after years of silence, is the bravest thing you can do. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Please like, subscribe, and comment below. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you want to know more, there is another story waiting for you on the screen right now. Don't miss it. Goodbye for now, and remember, your voice is your power.